The rules weren't written to control us. They were written because people had already died before we ever arrived. Blood was the ink, fear was the paper, and every single person who walked through our gates was warned the same way. Follow the rules, or you won't last a week. We weren't heroes. We weren't brave. We were alive. And in the end, that was the only thing that mattered. The first rule was simple. Never open the outer door after sunset. Not for screams, not for knocking, not even for someone you recognized, especially not for someone you loved. The world outside changed when the light disappeared, and anyone still out there after dark was either dead or about to make you dead too. We learned that lesson early. We learned it the hard way. The second rule was silence at night. No fires, no music, no raised voices. The dead were drawn to sound, but so were other survivors, the kind that smiled before they killed you. We survived because we became ghosts, breathing softly, moving carefully, pretending we didn't exist. The third rule was the hardest. Trust the rules more than your instincts. Instincts told you to help. Instincts told you to run. Instincts told you that this time would be different. Instincts were the reason cities fell. Discipline was the reason our camp still stood. For 214 days, the rules kept us alive. We lost people, yes, to sickness, to bad luck, to mistakes made outside the walls. But inside, the system worked. Until one night, when someone decided that one rule didn't matter anymore. Just one. A small break. A human choice. And in less than an hour, everything we built was gone. When the alarms finally sounded, it wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic. It was a soft, broken signal that cut through the dark like a dying heartbeat. By the time we understood what it meant, the damage was already done. One door, one moment of hesitation, one person who believed the rules were optional when feelings got involved. That was all it took to turn safety into a graveyard. People like to imagine the end of the world as chaos. Explosions, screams, endless gunfire. But the truth is quieter than that. The end comes in whispers, in excuses, in someone saying, just this once. That's how it always starts, not with evil, but with kindness in the wrong moment. Before I tell you what happened that night, you need to understand something. This story isn't about zombies. It's about people, about fear. About the fragile agreements we make to survive when the world no longer cares if we live or die. If you're still listening, it's because part of you already knows that rules exist for a reason, and that breaking them always has a price. If you want to hear how close we came to surviving, and how fast everything fell apart, stay with me. Subscribe to Last Day Chronicles if you haven't already. These are not stories of heroes. These are records of the last decisions people ever made. And as you listen, I want you to think about one question. If you had been there that night, would you have followed the rule? Or would you have broken it too? Because in the world I'm about to describe, that single choice is the difference between seeing another sunrise and becoming part of the silence. The camp was built inside an old logistics warehouse on the edge of the city. Far enough from downtown to avoid the worst hordes, close enough to scavenge when we had to. Concrete walls, one main gate, one secondary emergency door that almost no one remembered existed, except the night everything ended. We didn't call it a fortress. We called it a pause, a place to breathe between disasters. Every new arrival went through the same ritual. We fed them, we cleaned their wounds. Then we sat them down and explained the rules, not shouted, not threatened, calmly, slowly, because fear makes people forget, and forgetting gets people killed. Some nodded too fast, some argued. Those ones never stayed long. The rules weren't negotiable. They were the price of entry. We kept a written list nailed to a support beam near the center of the warehouse. Paper was rare, but that list mattered more than bullets. Rule 1 was underlined twice. Rule 2 had dried blood on the corner from an argument months earlier. Rule 3 was smudged from too many hands touching it, as if people believed understanding could be transferred through skin. Most days were boring. That's something no one tells you about the apocalypse. Survival is repetitive. You wake up hungry. You work. You count supplies. You wait. Boredom became proof that the rules were working. Every quiet night felt like a small victory we didn't dare celebrate. The person who broke the rule wasn't reckless. That's what hurts the most. It wasn't some idiot chasing hero fantasies. It was someone we trusted. Someone who had followed every rule for months. Someone who had lost people before and couldn't stand the idea of losing one more. It happened just after sunset, during the shift change on watch. That small window when responsibility moves from one tired pair of eyes to another. We had a rule about that too. No distractions during transition. But rules rely on people, and people get distracted. There was knocking. Soft at first. Careful. The kind of knock that sounds human because it is human. A voice followed, weak, familiar. Someone outside knew our names. That's when fear turned into confusion, and confusion opened the door just wide enough for everything else to slip through. No one saw the breach right away. No alarms screamed, no gunshots rang out, just a door that wasn't fully closed, a rule that wasn't fully followed, and something patient enough to wait in the dark while we convinced ourselves everything was still under control. It took 7 minutes for the first scream to reach the center of the warehouse. By then, the outer corridor was already lost. The emergency door, the one no one talked about, had been propped open just long enough for the cold air to carry a smell we all recognized too late. Rot, iron, the unmistakable warning that should have sent everyone running. Panic doesn't arrive all at once. It spreads unevenly, like fire through damp wood. Some people froze, some grabbed weapons they barely knew how to use. Others ran toward the noise, convinced they could still fix it. That was another unspoken rule. Once panic starts, it feeds on hope, and hope, in the wrong moment, is deadly. I remember stepping onto the catwalk and looking down at the floor where we used to eat together. The lights flickered, generators strain, and in that stuttering glow I saw shapes moving where there should have been none. Not rushing, not screaming, walking, waiting. The dead had learned our layout faster than we expected. Or maybe they already knew it. Someone shouted to seal the main gate. Someone else argued that people were still outside the inner rooms. Voices overlapped. Orders contradicted each other. The rules had given us clarity for months. But without them, we were just scared animals pretending to be organized. Every second we debated was another second the breach widened. The person who opened the door tried to fix it. I saw them run back down the corridor crying, repeating the same sentence over and over. I didn't think. They never finished it. Something grabbed them from the dark, hard and fast, and dragged them out of sight. No heroic sacrifice, no final words. Just silence where a human being used to be. By the time we locked down the inner storage rooms, half the camp was gone. Not dead yet, just unreachable. We could hear them through the walls. Banging, pleading, calling names. Rule 1 echoed in my head like a curse. Never open the door after sunset. We listened to people die because we had already learned what happens when you don't. Near dawn, the noises stopped. That was the worst part. Silence returned, heavier than before, settling over the warehouse like dust on a grave. When the sun finally rose, it revealed what breaking one rule had done. Blood on the floor where we used to plan tomorrow. Empty beds, supplies scattered untouched because there was no one left who needed them. I was one of 12 who walked out that morning. Out of 43, we didn't argue anymore. We didn't rewrite the rules. We didn't need to. The lesson was carved into us deeper than ink ever could be. The rules hadn't failed us. We failed them. And in a world like ours, that kind of mistake only needs to happen once. We buried nothing. There was no time, no strength, and no point. Bodies attract attention, and attention is a luxury you can't afford after you've been exposed. We took what we could carry, burned the paper with the rules still nailed to it, and left before the sun climbed high enough to betray us. Staying would have been another broken rule, one we couldn't survive. As we walked away, no one spoke. Grief hadn't arrived yet. Shock always comes first. Grief needs safety, and safety was gone. Every shadow looked like a mistake waiting to happen. Every sound felt like punishment. We moved like people who knew the world was keeping score. Hours later, when the warehouse was just a shape on the horizon, one of the survivors finally asked the question that had been sitting in all of our throats. Was it worth it? No one answered, because we all knew what he really meant. Was saving one life worth losing everyone else? Was compassion still compassion when it erased the future? That night we made camp in the ruins of a collapsed gas station. No walls, no gates, just distance and exhaustion. Someone suggested we write new rules. Someone else laughed, not because it was funny, but because it hurt too much to believe rules could save us again. What we didn't realize yet was that we were already following them, silently, instinctively, shaped by what we'd lost. I still think about the person who opened the door, about how easy it is to judge when you weren't the one hearing a familiar voice in the dark. I don't hate them. I can't. If the world were kinder, they would have been right. But the world ended, and kindness without discipline became another way to die. This is why I'm telling you this now. Not to scare you, not to pretend I was smarter or stronger than anyone else, but to leave something behind that might last longer than we did. In the end, survival isn't about courage. It's about restraint, about choosing the rule over the feeling, even when it breaks your heart. Because when the world falls apart, it doesn't punish you for being cruel, it punishes you for being careless. If you're still listening, it means this story found you for a reason. Maybe you like apocalyptic fiction. Maybe you're just passing time. Or maybe deep down you understand that this wasn't really about zombies, walls, or a warehouse at the edge of a dead city. It was about limits, about the thin line between being human and staying alive. I don't know how long we lasted after that. Days blur together when every sunrise feels borrowed. Groups break apart. People disappear. The world keeps ending in small, personal ways. But wherever we went, the rules followed us. Even without being written, even without being spoken. We waited for daylight. We kept silent at night. We learned to walk away when every instinct screamed to turn back. Sometimes I still hear that knock in my dreams, soft, careful, almost polite. I wake up with my heart racing, reminding myself that the door is gone now, that the choice has already been made, that everyone who could be hurt by it already was. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. The end of the world doesn't come from monsters alone. It comes from the moment we decide that the rules don't apply to us, that just this once won't matter, that we're special enough to survive the consequences. We weren't. And if this really is the last day for all of us someday, I hope you remember this story. Not because it's frightening, but because it's honest. When everything is on the line, survival isn't about doing what feels right. It's about doing what keeps you alive. After that, I stopped counting days. Numbers stopped meaning anything once the future became uncertain. Time wasn't something we owned anymore. It was something we borrowed, hour by hour, mistake by mistake. And every night we survived felt less like a victory and more like a warning. Somewhere out there, I know other groups are making their own rules, writing them down, arguing over them, believing they'll never be the ones to break them. I hope they're right. I hope they never have to learn what we learned in the dark, with a door half open and regret flooding in faster than the dead. If this story reaches you, remember it as more than fiction. Remember it as a reminder. Because when the world collapses, it doesn't give second chances. It only waits for the first mistake. And it always starts with one rule. I don't know who will hear this next. Maybe someone safe. Maybe someone already hiding, listening to the dark the way we used to. If that's you, take this with you. Carry it the way we carry scars, not to reopen them, but to remember where they came from. Write your rules before you need them. Follow them when it hurts. Follow them when it feels wrong, especially then. Because the world that ends doesn't care about your reasons, it only reacts to your choices. This is the last thing I'll say before I move on. Before this road takes me somewhere else, or nowhere at all. If you're still alive, if you still have people depending on you, don't wait for proof. Don't wait for forgiveness. Don't wait for daylight to teach you what the night already knows. One rule can save you, one mistake can erase everything. And once it's gone, there's no door left to close.